In today's lesson, we are going to be talking about comparing and ordering integers. In previous lessons, we have talked about number lines and finding integers on the number line. Little reminders for that is we talked about positive numbers are the numbers greater than 0 or to the right of 0, and negative numbers are numbers less than 0 or to the left of 0. One way to think about comparing integers is that if you graph the integers on a number line, left is less and right is more. You do not always have to graph these on a number line, and that's just one strategy. So for example, if we were doing this first problem comparing 5 and 2, if we graph both of those on our number line, 5 would be right here, 2 would be right here. Now we know that 2 is on the left and 5 is on the right, so 2 is less, so our symbol would look like this because we always put, I'm going to put a little red dot here, the smaller side of our less than symbol towards the smaller number. So we would read this statement as 5 is greater than 2. And just so we don't get confused, I'll put a box here, okay? 5 is greater than 2, okay? So now I want you to pause this video and try the next couple problems. You can graph them if you want, or can just kind of consider them and then write down your answers. So pause now if you haven't done so already. Alright, so if I'm comparing -4 and -1, if I'm doing this one right over here, okay, if I want to graph these, and since we still can, I would graph -4 right here and -1 right here in the purple. So we know that -4 is less than -1 because -4 is on the left. So when I go to put my symbol in, that's going to look like this. -4 is less than -1. Now let's go to -3 and 1. Okay, and I'm going to do this problem in brown, and I'm still able to graph these, so I will. If I graph -3 in the brown, it would be here, and if I graph 1 in brown, it would be here. -3 is on the left, so -3 is less than 1. One thing to kind of consider, if we're comparing a negative number and a positive number, the negative number is always going to be less than the positive number, and that kind of goes with the definition. If we go back and look at -4 and -1, they're both negative numbers. Okay, now the bigger the negative number, the farther away from 0 it is, so that's why -4 is less than -1. Now, let's look at our last example, and we'll do this one in orange. Now, the thing here is our number line right now is not big enough to graph them, so we need to think about -8 and -15. The first thing I notice is that they are both negative. Okay, so I kind of use the terminology, which one is more negative? Alright, so since they're negative, we could think of them as owing money. This one I owe someone $8, and this one I owe somebody $15, and which one's kind of worse? -15. Okay, -15 is going to be farther from 0 than -8. So when we put our symbol in there, we're going to put that smaller end towards -15. Okay, when comparing two negative numbers, the bigger negative is less. Please pause your video now and try solving these next 4 problems. Write your answers down so that you can compare them once I go over them. Okay, so looking at our first problem here, -14 and -9, they are both negative, so I have to think about which one is going to be farther to the left on my number line, or you can think about which one's more negative, and I know that -14 is less than -9. For the next problem, we have -23 and -22. Okay, they're both negative again. So which one's going to be farther away from 0, or which one's going to be more negative? And that would be -23 is less than -22. Next problem is -12 and +7. Now here's a case of negatives and positives. The negative is always less than the positive. Okay, that's by its definition. Negative numbers are to the left of 0. Positive numbers are to the right of 0. And our last problem, 18 and 20, these ones, it's almost a trick here. They're both positive. So now you have to think about, okay, they're both to the right of 0. They're both, but which one is going to be farther to the right or farther away from 0? And in this case, we would say that 18 is less than 20. So how did you do? Did you get all 4 correct? For our next task, we are going to take some numbers and put them in order. So instead of comparing just 2 numbers at a time, we are going to be comparing let's say 3 or more numbers at a time. In this particular problem, we have 4 numbers. And we are trying to put them in order from least to greatest. So L to G stands for least to greatest. So you are basically taking these 4 numbers and kind of comparing them to each one. And you're asking yourself, okay, which one is going to be the least? And which one's going to be the greatest? And what's their order going to be in between? I always like to start with the least. So I might start off by just looking at, okay, well, I have 2 negative numbers, okay? Least is, if you have negative numbers, we know that the negative ones are going to be to the left. So out of -11 and -8, which one is farther away from 0 in kind of our negative land? That would be -11, okay? Then would come -8 because it's my next negative. Okay, but now let's look at our positives. We've got 4 and 2. Okay, so if I'm getting greater, so I've got -11, I've got -8, what would come next? That would be 2, and then 4. Okay, these, if we graphed these on a number line, -11 would be the farthest on the left, then it'd be -8, then 2, then 4. Okay, all right, so let's try another one. Before I work through this one, I would like you to pause your video now and put these in order, least to greatest, and then we'll talk about it together. So pause your video now if you haven't done so already. I'm going to go over the answer now. So I would start just by looking at my negative integers. So I have -7 and -4, and I know that -7 is less than -4. Now I'm going to look at my positive numbers, in which case I have a 2, a 6, and a 3. I know that kind of working my way left to right, I would have 2, then 3, then 6. There's my final answer. As always, please try this one. Pause the video now and try it. Write down your answer so that we can compare when you come back. I'm going to go over the answer now. To begin, as with all the others, I like to just start off with my negative integers. I have -9, -2, and -5. Thinking about what order they go in, I know that I would have -9, then -5, then -2, and it's kind of like just counting backwards of sorts. Next, I have 5, 0, and 6. Hopefully you remember that 0 is the number in between your negatives and positives. So when you go from negative integers to positive integers, if they give you 0, that's going to be in between them. And then I have 5 and 6. Sorry, I was looking at my list. 5 and 6. So hopefully this has helped you for comparing and ordering integers. Let me know if you have any questions.